The Angry Family is a good start to the 6th season of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is the first episode of season 6. It's directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it's a great episode. This one starts off with Marie, Frank, Robert, Ray, and Debra at the boys' school, and the children are reading out stories, and we get a couple of children reading stories, and then it's Michael's turn, and he begins reading the story, and it's very short, so I will tell you exactly what it is, word for word. But as soon as he said the title of his story, The Angry Family, everybody's faces, they were just absolute pictures. Absolutely loved them. And then the story is as follows. The daddy was mad at the mummy. The mummy was mad at daddy. The mummy and daddy were very mad at grandpa. The grandma was mad at everybody. The grown-ups were always very loud. They hurt the kids' ears. The end. And needless to say, the reactions from the adults, absolutely brilliant. And they talk about it when they're in the kitchen, when they're back at home in the next scene. And then it's just Debra and Ray, and they're arguing about it. But then when any of the twins come into the room, they're being extra nice and loving and hugging each other and then arguing again. And they decide to go they have to go and visit the teacher, and they talk about this. And I feel like things were being very much directed towards Debra, but actually, for the most part, I think, while it's unkind, I think that that's a valid point. When I think back to basically any other episode, usually situations are escalated by Debra. And I'm not saying she doesn't always have a point, or that it's not valid for her to get angry about whatever situation, but usually it is Debra. Ray will kind of try and make a joke out of things, or he'll try and leave the room. Marie will say something quite powerful that she's really hurt, and then she'll leave the room or she'll leave the house. Frank will just storm off. Robert will crack a joke that makes everybody uncomfortable. So it's usually Debra who kind of escalates things. And again, I'm not saying that that's necessarily always a bad thing, but I think that was an interesting point. She did say something that wasn't fair, though. She kind of unleashes and she starts to rant and kind of go off at one of the teacher, and she says, I've got a whole freak show that's set up tent right across the street. But that's not true, because we did learn in a flashback at some point, I can't remember which episode, that the house opened up across the street from Marie and Frank. They decided to move in there when the house came up. So actually, she set up tent across the road from the quote-unquote freak show. So it's not fair to say that they invaded her space when she and Ray decided to move across the road from them, which I'm not saying is a bad decision, but it's not necessarily fair for her to blame Marie and Frank for living across the road when it was kind of her decision and Ray's decision. And then actually she does say something that I think was great. She said to the teacher, you are in no position to judge me, which I think is valid, but I don't think the teacher is necessarily judging either. I think the teacher is there to help. If Michael writes a story that suggests things at home are not that great and that it's a very uncomfortable atmosphere, the teacher is doing the right thing by stepping in. And we then cut to the whole family, all of the adults, having to talk with Adam, the school's counsellor. And we have some brilliant dialogue here. We have a lot of back and forth between the characters and pointing fingers, and it's just very well executed. I don't think it's necessarily the funniest scene. I didn't find it to be that funny, but I certainly did find it to be really fascinating and watching the characters interacting with each other. And we have some insights about how characters feel about one another. And Frank said something that I think was interesting, but quite harsh, maybe true, I don't know. He said, when he's talking about Marie, he said, she married him and this one still can't deal with it. This one being Marie, of course. And I feel like it was not the right thing to say, but I think it was definitely very thought-provoking. And it suggested that maybe Michael wrote this book to give his family a message. And when that was said, that's when it occurred to me. And I've seen this before, but I absolutely could not remember what happened. It's been over a decade since I saw this. And that's when I realised, I bet the book wasn't about the family. And they've gone through all of this. They've had all of these emotions. They've had these, I think, quite valuable discussions. And it probably wasn't even about the family. And this is confirmed very quickly, as in the next scene, Ray and Debra are in bed, and Michael comes into the room, and they're talking about his story, and it is confirmed that it wasn't about the family, it was about some TV show. And I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. Part of me wishes that happened a little earlier on in the episode. I would have liked to have seen the aftermath of that, But it didn't need to happen. It's absolutely not something that's a fault with the episode. I don't think it was underdeveloped. Just personally, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the aftermath. But I don't know. I'd love to know if anybody came to that conclusion sooner. Was it obvious to anybody else earlier on in the episode that this was never about the Barones at all? It was about some random fictitious family. And maybe it took me a while to realise it. But once I realised, I was glad that it was confirmed pretty quickly. The Angry Family is a great episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. It's a very strong start to season 6, and I'm looking forward to rewatching the rest of this season.